Good afternoon. I would contend that the greatest invention of our species is not fire, it's not the wheel, it's not the microprocessor, it's not the X factor. It's our ability to organize, our ability to join together in groups ranging from 2 people to 2 million people to achieve things that individuals could never possibly achieve in their wildest imagination. If you just look around where we are now, everything was produced by an organization. The actual physical building, the concept of TEDxLSE, this beautiful carpet that I'm standing on, all of it was produced by an organization. And you can think of an organization as a human system rather than a structure and layers and spans and organization. And those human systems are absolutely essential for our society. All wealth is produced by human systems. As you get closer to my age and further away from your age, you begin to worry about your pension. 98% of pensions are produced by the value created by organizations. Even the people in the room, you are in a way produced by organizations. Most of you will have had a helping hand from a human system that we call a hospital or a mid-care system when you were born. But we understand amazingly little about these human systems. We know that some of them produce astounding outcomes. We're literally the man on the moon. But we also know that 4/5 of them go bust within a 5-year period. So what's the difference? What's the secret sauce that some organizations have got that allow them to escape the boundaries of the gravitational force of low aspirations, and other organizations fail to kind of bottle that secret sauce? So over the last half decade, I've been leading a research project that's trying to answer that question. I wouldn't claim we've got a complete answer to it, but I think we're much closer now than we were just a few years ago. We call the body of work Accelerating Performance, and we were trying to answer the question, what differentiates the winners from the also-ran? It produced a book. I'd like you to buy the book. I'm desperately short of the money. Please, it makes a wonderful Christmas present, birthdays, large extended families. Shall I go back to the book? Have you heard? You probably heard enough about the book. Right, so let me canter you through the research that we did super quick and then come to conclusions for you. First, strategy is dead. Don't bother going to your strategy lessons. They're a complete waste of time. Strategy doesn't matter anymore. This chart in front of you is showing the comparative impact of aiming at different profit pools over the last several decades. And in 1975, when I was sitting where you are, the companies in the world then were winning through strategy. They were aiming at different profit pools, either geographic or product profit pools. What's happened over the last 40 or 50 years, and you see it reflected in the cost of capital now declining to almost nothing, is that companies don't win through strategy anymore. Companies, whilst this has been happening, this has also been happening. Companies win through execution. So the easiest way to think about this is, if you imagine a big table, along here we lay the strategy statements of the top 25 banks in the world. Over there we lay the strategy statements of the bottom 25 banks in the world. It would be reasonable to have 2 hypotheses. One is the top 25 banks will have different strategies from each other. The second is the top 25 will certainly have different strategies from the bottom 25. That's why they're the top. Neither of those are true. The strategies of the top 25 banks are almost identical. The strategies of the bottom 25 banks are almost identical. And the strategies of the 50 together are almost identical. They are all retreating from casino banking. They're all refocusing on a core franchise of retail banking or wealth management. They're all moving many, many thousands of staff offshore to take advantage of labor arbitrage opportunities. They're all digitizing anything that can move. The difference between the winners and the losers is not strategy, it's the pace of execution. It's reducing time to value by the winners moving more quickly than the slow organizations and the losers. So what enables some companies to move much quicker than other companies? And not just companies, religious organizations, spiritual organizations, charitable, state organizations, we depend on all of them. So that was our research question. What enables some to move quicker than others? We looked at the FT 500, so the 500 biggest companies in the world, and we managed to get permission to study 239 of them over the course of 4 years. And we applied 4 criteria. The first is that we were looking for companies that were in the top quintile, so the top 20%, for organic revenue growth in both 3 years and 7 years. When you do that, you knock out a bunch of those companies. Second rule of 20 that we applied is not only did they have to be quickly growing, but most of that growth needed to occur from organic routes, so not buying your way to growth. That threw out another bunch of those companies. The third was that we were looking for companies where the majority of their economic success was not created by dependence on their home state. So that would knock out very large companies like Saudi Aramco, where 96% of their revenue comes from their home state. And then finally, as companies grow, their profitability tends to decline, but we knocked out any companies where, as they grew organically, their profitability fell off a cliff. So we stopped any company where their profitability declined by more than 20% as they grew quickly. When you apply those 4 rules to the 500 biggest companies in the world, you get left with only 23 companies. There are only 23 companies of the biggest 500 today that are growing in the top quintile, they're doing it organically, the profits are not declining too much, and they're not dependent on their home state. We call those 23 companies the super accelerators, and probably blue dots is not going to help you with what they are, so I'll give you the names. Rather irritatingly to me, these are in alphabetical order. Apple is number 1. I kind of wish it wasn't, but nothing against Apple, but rather predictable. You see Google on there, it's number 3. Alphabet is the parent company of Google. You see a couple of other things. One is you only see one European company, only Shire. Shire is a UK domiciled pharmaceuticals company. The rest are all Asian and US. Asia is no longer emerging. Asia is well and truly here. We see a very healthy chunk of these 23 from Asia. In the US, you see some of the West Coast technology darlings, but you also see rather traditional companies like Danaher is an industrial conglomerate. These are the companies that have cracked the code. So then our question was, what the hell do they do that the rest don't do? And can we in some way bottle it, if I listened to Charles this morning? So we went off, we studied them in a great deal of depth, and we found that there were 4 underlying capabilities that drove that level of growth. First is, perhaps not surprisingly, those companies are better at putting their customer first. So just a very tiny snapshot of the data. We asked not them, well, we also asked them, but we asked their customers, do these companies deeply understand your needs? On a 0 to 7 scale, the answer for these 23 companies, the average answer was 6.2. We asked the bottom quintile of growing companies, we asked their customers, do those companies really understand what you want? On a 0 to 7 scale, the average answer was 0.9. Good companies understand their customers better, and their customers know that they understand them better. Second, simplicity. The statistically most important driver of economic success for any company that we found, simplicity. One measure of that is we looked at how many products do the companies have and what percentage of those products drive 80% of their value creation. Now, you're all familiar with the Pareto optimality, the 80-20 rule, so it doesn't quite apply in this case. The average number of products that drive 80% of the value in the 239 companies that we looked at was 1,007. 1,007 products. The average number of products in the super accelerators that drive 80% of the value is 9. Successful companies are simple. Unsuccessful ones have excess complexity. Number 3, space to innovate. Now, the inverse of this is fear. So organizations struggle to innovate when the environment is created in which if you try something and you fail, you're in trouble. So we have in our work what we call the fear index, which is what's the level of concern and anxiety in these companies about doing something that's brave. The level of concern and anxiety in the bottom quintile growth companies is 11 times higher than in the super accelerators. Successful companies create an environment of experimentation, fun, and freedom, not command, control, discipline, rigidity. Final one, they're agile. So the test here is, can your company move ideas around itself quicker than the market? And I'll just give you one horrible example. The slowest organization we found in this regard was the National Health Service. It's a bit of a problem, especially as you approach my great age. So if you have a stroke, the best way of stopping you die post-stroke is called a venous thromboembolism. It's a particular procedure to stop the artery that's burst getting worse. All clinical opinion in the UK is that that procedure works. The average time it took for that procedure to be innovated and spread across half of the NHS was 9 years. It took 9 years. In that 9 years, 14,700 people died that could have been saved through that procedure. If you take the super accelerators and you ask the same question, how long does it take for a good idea to spread across half of the organization? So the worst we found is 9 years. The best we found was 37 days. The difference between a bad organization and a good organization is speed of ideas adoption. So those 4 things are absolutely critical to create organizations that will win, and we know that organizations that win produce enormous benefits for society. So it still left us with a few other questions. One is, how the hell do you do those things? How do you make those 4 things come true? So many of you are students from LSE, you like data. I thought I would show you the plumbing chart here. So what we've done here is we've taken those 4 things, we've blown them out into 13 things, and then we've correlated them with rates of organic revenue growth. So the red circle in the inside is companies that are shrinking by more than 8% a year. The green are companies that are growing by more than 8% a year, and the other colours are in between. The data is what's called parametric, which is as you grow more, the likelihood of you doing these 13 things more increases with each stage of growth. It's perfect data. What it tells us is if organizations want to be successful, they have to be able to do these 13 things. That's fine. How do you do these 13 things? So we found 4 patterns of success. We call them recipes, you could call them archetypes, but there are 4 ways that we found of organizations being successful. And they fall into the 4 categories that I describe here. So on the upper, I know these charts, so I can get to it before the graphics get to it. On the upper left, we call it customer intimate. These are organizations that know their customer better almost than the customer knows themselves. Bottom left is what we call talent magnet. So a McKinsey or a Goldman Sachs would be a talent magnet organization. Their DNA, their competitive secret sauce, is winning by being better at managing the talent equation. Of course they care about their customers. They're not abusive to their customers, but that's not their secret sauce. Bottom right, this is the execution play. These are organizations that win the game of inches by out-competing their competitors a little bit better every day. Someone like a Tata would be a wonderful example of that. 360,000 people, they've grown from 7 billion to 17 billion in the course of 5 years, just by being a little bit better every day. And then upper right, portfolio investor, someone like a BlackRock. BlackRock are the world's largest investment management company. As of Friday, they had 3.2 trillion under management. They move resources to opportunities better than anyone else I've ever seen. What the data tells us is you can't be good at all 4. What the data actually tells us is you better be good at one of them. If you're not in the top quintile for one of those 4 patterns, your chances of not being an independent company, so have gone bust, or have been bought, or have been downsized and outside the FT 500, your chances of no longer being independent go up by 600% over 2 years. You have to be good at one of those four things. Many companies are not. In the middle are a few threshold actions. We found no company that was in the top quintile compared to all the rest of the companies that was not also good at these things. I won't talk you through them all, but one of them is use purpose as your fuel. Emphasize the purpose of your institution. The purpose of an institution is not to create shareholder value. The purpose of an institution is to fulfill a customer need and thereby create shareholder value. So there's a set of things you have to be good at a minimum in the center, and then you have to choose which of the other recipes will create competitive advantage for you. Let me just give you an intuitive feel for what those recipes are by giving you 4 examples. So Cigna is the best company I've ever seen in terms of really understanding their customers, their consumers. They're the biggest global healthcare giant at the moment. They deeply understand what their customers want. Of course they're good at execution, of course they move resources about, but they're all about the consumer. If you turn to the second recipe, the portfolio investor, Danaher, I mentioned earlier, they're an industrial conglomerate. They've got over 140 businesses. They don't have a budget process. They move capital, talent, and ideas to opportunities seamlessly. Third one, moving from portfolio investor to execution engine, HDFC, the global but Indian domiciled bank. If you pre-populate your details on the web and you call up HFDC for a loan, the average time that they can tell you whether you are going to get that loan or not is 8.4 seconds. 8.4 seconds. Average time it takes Barclays, 17 days. So, bit of a gap, I would say. I haven't calculated what 17 days divided by 8.4 seconds is yet. Last one, I can't really do a presentation like this without mentioning Google. A good friend of mine, Matt, who runs Google in Europe, you can read the quote. In Google, it's not about following command and control hierarchical structures, it's about breaking free of those structures and creating an environment in which very gifted people can achieve a great deal. So those are the 4 recipes. It still leaves you with a question. We know that execution wins. We know that choosing a recipe matters. But how do you choose a recipe? What we found across all the companies we looked at, 239, there were only 6 companies that were good at 2 recipes. Now, tellingly, all 6 of those companies were super accelerators. So the lesson seems to be choose one recipe, but if you're a super accelerator, you can probably just about get away with choosing 2 recipes. Of the 239 companies that we measured, 41 of them aspired to be good at all 4 recipes. We measured them 18 months ago. Of the 41 companies, 37 no longer exist. The pace of change in the competitive environment is rather quick. So all of that still leaves you with one more level of question. Why are some people good at doing this and others not? And we were really interested in personal skills, competencies. And I'd invite you, as largely young people in the audience thinking about your career, how do you stack up against these 4 things? We actually looked at 1,800 different competencies across 4,500 people in 239 companies. And we found that most skills don't differentiate. You have to be able to read a balance sheet. It doesn't matter whether you're in a high-growth company or a low-growth company, you have to be able to read a balance sheet. You have to be able to make a presentation and deal with it when your slides don't work. You have to be able to set objectives. Resource fluidity. So resource fluidity is the ability of the organization and the ability of individuals to apply resources to opportunities. So in an organization, what are resources? They are money, capital, talent, and ideas. Opportunities are products, markets, and customers. In an ideal world, we have 0 transaction costs and complete fluidity because we can move those resources to those opportunities. The most successful people we found were very adept at doing that. The least successful people we found manage to get their resources stuck in islands where they're not able to apply it to the best opportunity. The second one is the one we can't see yet, which I call ripple intelligence. So ripple intelligence is the ability to be on the dance floor and the balcony at the same time. It's the ability to join the dots, the ability to see around corners. You could call it strategic thinking. It's the ability to not only run the race, but look where you're running at the same time. If you have that, or can develop that, you stand a much better chance of being successful in business. When you go to the third one, dissolving paradox. This is probably the most difficult to get your head around. So as you become senior, you will all become senior, I'm sure, in your lives. As you become senior, the answer to every question becomes yes. So do you want, people often say to me, Colin, do you want to provide a very low-cost service to your customers, or do you want terrific customer service? The answer is yes, I do. Right? Do you want to have your people passionately empowered every day, or do you want them to have discipline and control because you work in a regulated environment? Yes, I do. I want all of those things. When you just think of those as alternatives where you can find a trade-off, that's fine, but you won't be in the high-growth companies. The leaders in the high-growth companies find a way to transcend those simple trade-offs and find a way of unifying that paradox into a new way of looking at things. The fourth, I call liquid leadership. Someone defined this for me the other day, and I love their definition. The definition of a liquid leader is someone that as they walk into the room, it lights up, rather than as they walk out of the room, it lights up. So I like that. I've met quite a few people where it tends to be dark as they enter the room. So our data, we kind of expected it to tell us that the days of vertical command and control leadership are over. It didn't. It told us that that control and discipline are just as important as they ever were, but that now needs to be augmented by leadership that creates followership, leadership that creates an environment in which people want to follow that individual. One very simple measure of what we did is we asked all those people I mentioned earlier, do you aspire to be like your boss? In the high growth companies, the top quintile companies, on a 0 to 7 scale, the answer to that was 6.2. In the low growth companies, so this is the bottom 20% of the world's biggest companies in terms of organic revenue growth, do you aspire to be like your boss? Competing with 6.2 at the top end, 0.36. I don't know why they even wanted to be like their boss at all, but a tiny amount. The leaders in low growth companies have created an environment in which people do not want to follow them. So let me bring it together into the bottom line. So I've thrown a lot of numbers at you. Let me just define it as the individual level, team level, and organization level. So for the individuals, I've been talking to you about this spectrum. The difference between the most effective and the least effective quintiles of people that we measured was economic performance of 400%. The highly effective leaders produce 4 times as much EBITDA, free cash flow, and ROACE each year as the less effective leaders. It's not 10 or 20% or, on a good day they're a bit better. It's 400% difference. So that's individuals, but individuals generally work in teams. So how do teams generate a better return? We looked at 3,200 teams. They obviously create a normal distribution curve. The difference in economic performance between the top of that distribution curve and the bottom of the distribution curve is economic performance of 22.8%. Just to give you a feel for that, a large telecoms company in Europe took this thinking. It said, okay, we've got about 70 teams that run our business. If we took the bottom half and made them as good as the top half, how much more money does that produce for us? For them, it was £7 billion. Now, they've captured about 4 billion of that 7 billion. They haven't managed to get it all, but 4 billion quid is not bad, and it's driven a 19% rise in their share price. Final one, and this is the most intuitively obvious, I think, for everybody, which is, okay, if you do all of this stuff, what difference does it make to the share price? If you take $100 and you were to invest that $100 in the FT 500 companies minus the 23 super accelerators 7 years ago, that $100 would be worth today $211.06. If you invest that same $100 in the super accelerators, so the same amount of money into the super accelerators, you would today have $436. The difference between the less successful organizations and the most successful organizations is roughly a doubling of shareholder value. It's all possible, it's all to play for. The difference between organizations being unsuccessful and organizations being very successful is fundamental to peace in our society, the degree of wealth generation for families and individuals, and the degree of political stability that we have in the organizations in our countries. My wish for you is that you take a little bit of this thinking and a whole load of other people's thinking and create organizations that are able to fulfill their potential. Thank you for listening. Appreciate it.